Some thought she had the gate bell and ignored it. She was standing at the stove, stirring her ofe onugbu with one hand and pressing the other flat against the curve of her belly, feeling the baby shift and settle like something precious turning over in sleep. 16 weeks, 4 months of learning a new kind of patience, a new kind of hunger, a new way of moving through a world that suddenly felt both larger and more fragile than it ever had before. She had cooked all morning. The soup was thick and dark and smelled the way her mother's kitchen used to smell, and she had been looking forward to sitting down and eating it in silence for the last 2 hours. The gate bell rang again, longer this time, impatient. She turned the stove to low and went to the door. Mama Naji was already pushing the gate open before Somtonchi reached it. She came through first, a large woman with a face that had never learned softness, wrapper tied high on her chest, head ties sitting at an angle that suggested she had not bothered to fix it properly because she did not feel she needed to. Behind them both, 4 more bags. Somtonchi stood very still. "Mama," she said carefully, "you didn't say... Chukwuebuka didn't tell me you were coming today." Mama Naji looked at her the way people look at a chair they are about to move. "Is it your husband's house or is it not?" She walked past Somtonchi into the living room, eyes moving over every surface. "Where is Chukwuebuka?" "He's at work. He'll be back by evening." Somtonchi looked at the bags. She counted them. 6. "How long are you..." "Oloma, bring my bag inside." Mama Naji had already sat down, already reaching for the remote control. "Somtonchi, is there food? We have been on the road since morning." If you are new here, this is the kind of story that will make you feel everything. Subscribe now and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. Somtonchi went back to the kitchen. She served them. She served Mama Naji a full bowl and Oloma a full bowl, and she set cold water on the table, and she smiled when Oloma finally looked up from her phone long enough to say thank you. She told herself it was fine. They had traveled. They were tired. Tomorrow things would settle into a rhythm she could manage. She went back to the kitchen to serve herself. The pot was empty. She stood there for a long moment with the ladle in her hand, staring at the bottom of the pot she had been cooking since 7 in the morning. The soup she had been craving for 3 days. She put the ladle down. She put her hand on her stomach. She did not say anything. She cut bread and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, listening to the sound of Mama Naji's TV program coming from the living room, and she told herself this was one day. One day did not mean anything. Chukwuebuka came home at 7, and the way his face opened up when he saw his mother sitting in the living room made Somtonchi feel something she did not want to name. "Mama," he crossed the room in 3 steps, and Mama Naji held his face in both her hands, the way she never once held Somtonchi's, and they spoke rapidly in Igbo, too fast for Somtonchi to follow from the doorway where she was standing. Later, in the bedroom, she told him, "Your mother and Oloma finished all the food I cooked. I had bread for dinner, Chukwuebuka. I am pregnant." He turned from unbuttoning his shirt and his face did the thing it always did when she raised something about his family. A slight tightening, a careful blankness. "I'm sure it was a mistake. They didn't know you hadn't eaten." "The pot was empty." "Chukwuebuka, I am not angry." And she wasn't, not yet. "I just want you to know what happened, and I want to know how long they are staying." He was quiet for a moment too long. "Chukwuebuka," her voice was soft. "How long?" "Just for a little while. Mama needs a change of environment. You know how she's been since Papa passed." He came to where she was sitting on the bed and crouched in front of her, taking her hands in his, looking up at her with that face she had married, open and warm and sorry. "I should have told you earlier. I know. I'm sorry." He pressed his lips to her knuckles. "You are not alone in this. I'm here." She looked at him for a long moment. She wanted to believe him. She did believe him. She loved him in the helpless, inconvenient way she had loved him since the 2nd year of their marriage, when he drove 4 hours in the rain because she called him crying and couldn't explain why, and he hadn't asked her to explain, just held her in the car park of a petrol station until she stopped shaking. She cupped her face with one hand. "Okay," she said quietly. He turned his head and kissed her palm. Then he rose and kissed her properly, slow and deliberate, one hand cradling the back of her head, and she leaned into it because she was tired, and he was warm, and for one moment the house felt like it belonged to her again. She pulled back first. "Tell your mother not to finish my food." "I will." He didn't. 3 weeks passed and Mama Naji did not behave like a guest. She behaved like a woman who had decided quietly and without announcement that this house was now hers and Somtonchi was the one visiting. She rearranged the kitchen on a Tuesday without asking, moving Somtonchi's pots to the bottom shelf and her own things to the top. She soaked dishes in the sink and left them there for 2 days at a time, the water going grey and cold, and when Somtonchi washed them herself, Mama Naji did not thank her. She received visitors, women from her church who had somehow found her in this city, and they sat in Somtonchi's living room eating Somtonchi's biscuits and speaking loudly until 10 at night. Oloama was worse in quieter ways. Sometimes she discovered it on a Thursday morning when she opened her wardrobe to get dressed for her antenatal appointment and found 3 of her blouses missing. She checked twice. She stood in front of the open wardrobe in her underwear, 20 weeks pregnant, one hand on her hip, and she knew before she even walked down the corridor. She knocked on the guest room door. Oloma opened it in Somtonchi's yellow blouse, the one she had bought in the 2nd month of pregnancy because it was loose enough to be comfortable and bright enough to make her feel like herself on the days her body felt like a stranger. "Is that my blouse?" she asked. Oloma looked at it with the mild interest of someone checking the time. "Oh, yes, I hope you don't mind. I just needed something to wear quickly." "I mind," Somtonchi said. "Please don't go into my wardrobe." The look Oloma gave her then was the kind that doesn't need words. It said clearly that Somtonchi was being difficult. It said she was overreacting. It said Oloma was family and family did not need to knock. Somtonchi took the blouse back and went to her antenatal appointment alone. That evening, she sat across from Chukwuebuka at the dinner table and waited until his mother and sister had gone to their rooms before she spoke. "Oloma went into my wardrobe. She was wearing my blouses, Chukwuebuka. I am 20 weeks pregnant. I am tired every single day. I come home from my appointment and the food I left is gone and the dishes are soaked in the sink and your mother's friends are in my living room. I need you to say something to them." Chukwuebuka looked at her with something that might have been guilt and might have been exhaustion. "What do you want me to say, Somtonchi? They are family. I can't." "I am your family," she said it quietly, not in anger, just as a fact that needed to be placed on the table between us. "I am your wife. I am carrying your child. I am going to my antenatal appointment alone because you have not made it to a single one. I am eating whatever is left in the pot after everyone else has eaten. I am 20 weeks pregnant and I am going to bed hungry, and that is not an accommodation problem. That is a protection problem." He was quiet. She waited. "I'll talk to them," he said finally. She nodded. She got up and cleared her plate and went to the bedroom. She did not slam the door. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a while, hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. He talked to them. She could hear the conversation through the wall, low, careful, apologetic at the edges in a way that told her he was managing his mother rather than correcting her. Mama Naji's voice rose once, sharp and brief, and then settled. Oloma said nothing. The next morning, Somtonchi found the sink full of soaking dishes again. If this story is hitting different, like this video right now and subscribe because what is coming next will break your heart. By 24 weeks, Somtonchi had stopped expecting things to change. She moved through the house carefully, like a woman navigating furniture in the dark. She cooked in posha and she hid in the back of the fridge. She stopped leaving her good things in the wardrobe and moved them to a box under the bed. She smiled when Mama and Naji's friends arrived and excused herself to the bedroom. She answered Oloma's occasional attempts at conversation with warmth she no longer felt. At night, Chukwuebuka would reach for her and she would let him hold her because she was not angry at him in a way she could explain, and she still loved him in the helpless way, and his arms were warm. "Are you okay?" he asked one night, his chin resting on top of her head, her back pressed against his chest. "I'm tired," she said. "The baby?" "Everything." He tightened his arms around her, pressed his lips to her hair. "It won't be like this forever," he said. "I promise." She closed her eyes. She wanted to ask him what forever looked like in his head, whether it looked anything like what she was living. But the baby was moving, slow and deliberate rolls that she felt deep in her belly, and she pressed Chukwuebuka's hand flat against the spot and felt him go still with wonder. "There," she whispered. "I feel it," he said. His voice had changed completely, soft and undone, in the way only the baby could make him. He kissed the side of her neck, then her jaw. She turned her face toward him and he kissed her properly, long and slow, and for those minutes, everything outside the bedroom ceased to exist. It was the in-between moments like this that kept her. The moments when he was just hers and she was just his, and the baby was a heartbeat between them. Then morning came. At 28 weeks, Somtochi woke to blood. She sat up slowly, looked down and felt a coldness move through her body that had nothing to do with temperature. She did not scream. She pressed her hand to her belly and spoke to the baby in a voice barely above a whisper. "We are okay," she said. "We are going to be okay." She called Chukwuebuka first. He didn't pick up. She called twice more. She called a cab, dressed herself with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be, and walked past the living room where Mama Naji was watching the morning news and did not look up. The hospital was bright and cold and efficient. The doctor was a small woman with kind eyes and careful hands who explained what placental stress meant in simple terms while Somtochi lay on the examination table staring at the ceiling. Reduced blood flow, the placenta under strain, the baby at risk, bed rest, proper nutrition, no stress, immediate and complete reduction of stress. "Is there anything at home causing you significant anxiety?" the doctor asked. Somtochi laughed. It came out strange, too short, too sharp. "Yes," she said, "there is." Chukwuebuka arrived 40 minutes later, still in his work clothes, out of breath, his face carrying a fear she had not seen on him before. He took her hand and held it too tightly. "Why didn't you wake me? I didn't hear my phone. The traffic." "Sit down," she said. He sat. She looked at him for a long moment, at this man she had chosen, at the fear in his eyes that she knew was real, at the hands holding hers that she knew meant it. "I want you to protect me. That is all I have ever asked. I need you to go home, and I need you to tell your mother and your sister that I am in this hospital because of stress and malnutrition, and I need quiet, and I need food, and I need my home back. I need you to say it like you mean it this time." His jaw tightened. His eyes were wet. "I mean it," he said. "Then go home and prove it." He went home. He spoke to them. This time, his voice did not apologize at the edges. Somtochi knew this because Uloma called her in the hospital that evening, voice tight with offense, wanting Somtochi to know that she had never in her life been spoken to that way and that she hoped Somtochi was satisfied. Uloma listened to the entire thing without interrupting. Then she said, "I hope you are well, Uloma," and ended the call and put her phone face down on the hospital blanket. She stayed in the hospital for 4 days. When she came home, the sink was empty. The kitchen was quiet. Mama and Naji sat in the living room and did not speak to her, which was the most peace she felt in weeks. Chukwuebuka had stocked the fridge with everything the doctor prescribed: fresh vegetables, protein, fruit she hadn't eaten since before the visitors arrived. He had written a schedule on a notepad on the kitchen counter: her meals, her rest times, her medication. She stood in the kitchen reading his handwriting and felt something loosen in her chest. That night, Chukwuebuka would lie beside her with one hand flat on her belly and told her he was sorry. Not the managed, careful sorry he had been giving her for weeks. A real one, the kind that comes from a place a person has finally allowed themselves to look at. "I kept telling myself if I kept everyone calm, nothing would break. I didn't see that you were already breaking." She turned her head to look at him in the dark. "Don't do it again," she said. "I won't." She believed him. She kissed him softly, just once, and he held her face in his hands like she was something he was only now understanding the value of. They lay in the quiet of their bedroom, and for the first time in months, the house felt like it had walls again.
But some things cannot be undone by 4 days of quiet. At 32 weeks, Somtochi woke at 2 in the morning with a pain that moved through her body like something tearing loose from the inside. She knew immediately. The way a person knows before knowing, she grabbed Chukwuebuka's arm in the dark and said his name once, and the sound of her voice brought him upright before he was fully awake. The drive to the hospital was 12 minutes. She counted them. The delivery room was loud, and then suddenly it was not. The monitor beside her bed made a sound, and then the sound changed, and the doctor's face changed, and Chukwuebuka's hand in hers went rigid, and Somtochi closed her eyes. She already knew. The room was very quiet for a very long time. Chukwuebuka broke first. He put his forehead down on the edge of her bed, and his shoulders shook, and the sound he made was the sound of a man who believed genuinely that wanting something badly enough was its own protection. Somtochi lay still. She looked at the ceiling. She pressed her lips together and did not make a sound. She did not cry for 3 days. If Mama Naji and Uloma are inside that house when I walk through the door, I will not be walking through it. I will get back in the car and I will drive to my sister's and I will file for divorce from there. The word divorce landed in the room like something physical. Chukwuebuka stared at her. I am not angry. I am not threatening you. I am telling you what I am going to do because you deserve to know in advance. I choose myself and you need to choose. He did not speak for a long time. She watched him. She watched him go through everything on his face. The guilt, the grief, the loyalty that was pointed in the wrong direction for too long. The love for his mother that was real. And the love for his wife that was also real. And the moment a person finally understands that love is not enough if it is not also action. He stood up. He walked into the corridor. He heard him dial. His voice through the door was low. It did not rise. It did not apologize. It said what it needed to say, and then it stopped. Pack, he said. I will explain later. Please just pack. If you have been watching until now, comment below. Where are you watching from? And don't go anywhere because this story is not finished yet. Mama Naji called Somtochi twice from the corridor phone. Somtochi did not pick up. Uloma sent 3 messages. Somtochi read them and put her phone away. By the time she was discharged, the house was empty of them. She walked through the front door and stood in the hallway and breathed. The kitchen was clean. The sink was empty. Her wardrobe was untouched. The house smelled like the candle she had left burning on the bedroom windowsill before everything fell apart. She walked to the nursery door and stood in front of it with her hand on the handle for a long time. She did not open it. Not yet. Chukwuebuka stood behind her. He did not tell her it was okay. He did not tell her to be strong. He put his hand on her shoulder and stood there with her in front of the closed door, and that was enough. They hired Uchenna 3 weeks later, a calm, round-faced woman who arrived on a Monday morning with a small bag and immediately understood, without being told, exactly what kind of house this was and what kind of woman Somtochi was. She cooked without being asked, she cleaned without disrupting, she brought Somtochi's meals to wherever she was sitting and left without waiting to be thanked. Slowly, the house began to breathe again. Somtochi went to therapy every Thursday. She sat in a small office with a woman who did not rush her, and she talked about the baby she had not named out loud yet, and the months of hunger she had absorbed quietly, and the version of herself she wanted to find again on the other side of all of it. Some Thursdays she cried the entire hour. Some Thursdays she sat in silence. Some Thursdays she laughed surprised at something the therapist said and walked out into the afternoon feeling 2 degrees lighter than she had walked in. Chukwuebuka made it to every single appointment. 8 months after the loss, Somtochi sat in the doctor's office and looked at the result in her hand and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, something quieter and more careful than happiness. Something that knew the cost of hope and chose it anyway. The doctor smiled at her. "Let's take very good care of you this time." "Yes," Somtochi said, "let's." This pregnancy was different from the first breath. Doctor's appointment every 2 weeks, Chukwuebuka in the chair beside her at every single one, holding her hand during the scans with an attention that learned from its own failures. Uchenna adjusted the meal schedule without being asked. The house was quiet and ordered and hers. There were hard days. Days Somtochi sat outside the nursery door and could not make herself go in. Chukwuebuka would find her there and sit on the floor beside her without speaking, just present, just warm, and eventually she would lean her head against his shoulder and they would sit together until she was ready to stand. One evening, he found her inside the nursery, paintbrush in hand, adding small yellow flowers to the wall border she had started months ago and never finished. He stood in the doorway watching her. "You're painting," he said. "Don't make it a big thing," she said, not turning around. He smiled. She could hear him. He crossed the room and stood behind her and put his arms around her from behind, careful of the brush, his hands locking over her stomach, his chin resting on her shoulder. She leaned back into him. The baby moved between them, slow and insistent, and they both stayed still. "Hello," Chukwuebuka said softly to the baby. "We've been waiting for you." Somtochi laughed. It was a real laugh, full and unguarded, the kind that surprises you on its way out. Full term, the delivery room, the sound of monitors and voices and Chukwuebuka saying her name over and over like a prayer. Then a cry, clear and furious and perfect. Somtochi reached for her daughter before anyone could say a word. She held Chidima against her chest and felt her weight, real and warm and here, and closed her eyes. She did not speak for a long moment. Then, quietly, lips pressed to the top of her daughter's head. "You made it. We made it." 3 weeks later, the garden, late afternoon light falling gold across the grass, Somtochi moving in slow circles with Chidima strapped to her chest, humming something low and old, a song her own mother used to sing in the kitchen when she thought no one was listening. Chukwuebuka appeared in the doorway. "You're dancing," he said. She didn't look up. "Don't make it a big thing." He smiled. She could hear him. She smiled. Chidima slept. If Somtochi's story moved you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that stay with you long after the end. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments right now. We read every single one.